This is the 007 Debriefings. I'm Intelligence Officer Wiz.
And I'm Weapons Specialist Zero.
Zero, how you doing this weekend? We're doing this early now. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I was playing a lot of vintage games this weekend, so I'm pretty well mentally rested up.
Okay.
And I've just been sort of revisiting all sorts of games, so stuff like Panzer Dragoons 2's Y and Fighters Megamix, so it's just been kind of fun taking a walk back in time.
You know, I've always wanted to try Panzer Dragoon Saga, but just the cost-prohibitive nature of that is just enough to be like, maybe I'll never play that. You know?
Yeah, this is not to say that I'm advocating navigating the high seas, but I would say that if you want to play it and you cannot afford several $100s for the original disc, I would not frown on you for taking that option.
Right, because MI6 does not condone the use of piracy, isn't that right, Zero? Yeah, that laugh is confirmation, guys, just so we make it clear. We are here to comb the files of MI6 to discuss the cinematic adventures of fun James Bond. This week, Casino Royale. You know, Zero, I gotta say, I'm just gonna go overly happy in this one because god damn it, is this movie good. When was the first time you've seen Casino Royale?
I had seen it in college. I had a roommate who was really, really big into just getting the newest movies as quick as possible, and apparently he had managed to source a digital copy of it from somebody who had ripped the Theater Master and basically digitized the shit out of it. So I watched it, I think, the second week that it was out in theaters, and just my college roommate was like, yo man, I remember you're a big Bond dude. Here's freaking Casino Royale. I'm just like, holy fuck, man, Jesus. And pretty much just, he sent me the file, and I was just like, yo man, thanks. And I was just like, yeah, I'm about to set it up on my TV. You want to watch it? He's like, hell no, man. I gotta go see a girl, man. So I'm getting the fuck out of here. So I had my dorm to myself, and I was just watching the movie, and what a magical moment that was.
Oh, so good. Oh man. All right. So let's get into our mission objectives for Casino Royale. We go through numerous aspects of the film, discuss it bit by bit. So let's start with 007, which is James Bond, played by Daniel Craig.
This one, my god, this was a breath of fresh air for me. Casino Royale was the one book in the Bond novels that sort of just set me off on really, really wanting to read, because as a younger kid, I was an ESL kid. English was not my first language, so I was always trying to find ways to motivate myself to force myself to read more. I just remember the school library having Casino Royale, and I remember having a bit of a love affair with the book, because I was just like, oh man, this is just so good. There's action, there's espionage. This just feels like the quintessential Bond experience. With growing up in school and everything, just the Brosnan stuff happened, and well, we all know how that went in our most recent reviews. Daniel Craig just nails what I imagine to be the perfect novel Bond. Cunning, brutal, and just absolutely ruthless on getting the job done. He's even a little bit of an asshole too, which just nailed depiction for me from what I remember from the novels. I was just like, love this. This is exactly what I want from a Bond character, and just he delivers on the spades.
He does a really good job in this movie, portraying Bond in so many different ways. As you said, brutal, just an asshole. He's also temperamental. He loses his cool. He loses money. He gets betrayed throughout the entire film, and yet he still feels perfect as Bond. And maybe it's because it's the prequel movie, it's the thing that starts it all, but it also makes a lot of sense as to what makes Bond who he is moving forward. It is an incredible performance in this movie. And I guess the other thing I can really say about it is, when it comes to Bond himself, what really knocks this movie out of the park is the writing. The writing does an exceptional job, just making Bond into this ruthless person, but still trying to get his tendrils into other aspects of Bond so incredibly well.
Daniel Craig just setting up this new era of Bond was just a revolutionary moment for me, especially from the fact that in this movie, Bond doesn't get any gadgets. I mean, any like I win button sort of gadgets, but I think really the only major gadgets he gets is a wireless listening bug, and then the complete medical kit that's in his Aston Martin, and that's it. for me, I was just like, oh my god, this is wonderful. Just no corny Brosnan era I win button sort of gadgets like, this pen is a grenade and it'll get you out of a jam. Oh, by the way, it has another feature. It has a 1 megawatt laser that can burn through everything. It was just kind of refreshing to see a Bond that lacked any gadgets that were just pure I win button. Craig just sort of plays into the whole, I've got to make use with whatever tools I've got my hands on. That's just kind of how it is. And for me, I thought it was just fantastic. That's not even going into some of the stunt choreography stuff and the fight choreography. When things get really brutal, he really just feels like he sort of flows into the fight choreography. It just looks like he's in his element. It's something that we haven't seen during the Brosnan era, because some of the fights in the Brosnan era didn't really look well choreographed out, whereas this one, it just looks fluid like a dance.
It is brutal, though. Like, that's the one thing that I really recognize, especially in the very first scene of the movie. The fighting is not only brutal, but like you said, it's quick. It is really intense. It's just incredibly well done, that action aspect, and it makes him into a different type of Bond. Like, right away, he's making the role his own, which is something that I had a big problem with Brosnan. But what I also will say that I think is incredibly well done with Craig in this one, which is like the first time I can remember this in any of the other Bonds, is I fully believe that he is falling for Vesper. And the rest of them, it's kind of like, he could be just trying to get him laid, or it's, for Queen and Country. In this one, it is very obvious he is falling for her, and it is easy to see why, and it's easy to believe it too.
Especially after just the traumatic experience that he goes through and everything, when he pretty much sort of like reveals to Vesper that she was the one who kind of mentally helped him keep going and everything, and then he sort of comes to terms with his feelings and everything. It's just kind of a very, very, very a tender moment that you really don't see out of Bond as a character, especially because most Bond movies like to kind of play into the womanizing bit a lot. And to see Bond have a tender side was just really interesting to see. And then it's kind of interesting because at one point, just Bond kind of reflects on himself and he's like, I think I'm done. I think I just want to get out of the spy business. And then, just tenders his resignation, and he's just ready to live a very quiet life with Vesper and everything. And it's just something that we don't really see out of a lot of the Bond movies, just a very, very tender and endeared Bond who just is passionately in love with the love interest character that's in the movie.
And in the end, it all makes sense as to why Bond is who he is throughout the other movies, because why is he such a womanizer? Because he got his heart broken so badly by Vesper, and when she did, it just makes everything make sense moving forward with any other Bond in that. And I think that's what makes this brilliant. There really aren't any loose ends where I can go, well, actually, this doesn't make sense because of this. After watching the last 20 of them, I don't see anything on here that you could turn around and go, well, actually, if you take this element here, that actually doesn't really match with the other 20. Do you have any at all?
Not that I can think of. Everything is just really wrapped tight, like it's got a bow on top.
Yeah, it's a masterful performance by Craig in this. I think it is probably the best performance as a Bond character, bar none. It is the best, period.
I still have the same feelings that I do from when I saw the movie the first time, way back in the 2000s and everything. What a masterful performance from Craig in the role of Bond. Just absolutely phenomenal. During the first time that I saw it, and even now, I think it's just one of the most masterful performances of all the Bonds, really. Just, he makes the identity his own, but for me, I think really the extra X factor that Craig has is that he is written to be very much more faithful to the Bond novels, because in the Bond novels, he doesn't really have that many magic gadgets to kind of get him out of a jam. He's just got to improv up a solution when the chips are down, and this one sort of just captures the desperation in some of the moments so well, and he just plays out those moments so perfectly. So for me, when I saw the movie way back in 2006, and then again for this review more recently, I was just kind of in awe, just going, my God, Daniel Craig, probably by far one of the best Bond actors we've seen.
So let's get into the villain, which is Le Chiffre, played by Mads Mikkelsen.
Mads Mikkelsen plays Le Chiffre so well. He's got sort of like this really sort of mastermindingly smarm to him. It's almost kind of brilliant because, of course, his background being that he's a former chess player who's now become sort of a international banker for terrorists and a bit of a gambler and everything. you have him really just kind of being smarmy for most of the movie, like, everything's going to plan. It's no big deal. I'm not worried. Oh, Bond's in the Bahamas? I don't care. And it isn't until Bond ruins his little stock scheme to short the Skyfleet stock, and he loses several $100 million, Le Chiffre starts to sweat. It's actually kind of interesting because in a couple of the past Bond movies, the villains have always been kind of smarmy and just, they've always kind of dismissed, when Bond has sort of really dashed their plans. The villains previously would have been like, whatever, small setback, who the fuck cares? Whereas when you have just Bond preventing the Skyfleet prototype from being blown up at Miami airport, you see him on the phone with his stock fund manager, and he's just like, sorry man, you bet the wrong way, and just to see Le Chiffre really, really having to sweat it out and find a way to magically replace $100+ million, it's just something that we don't really see from a Bond villain very much.
Le Chiffre is interesting in a number of ways, and I think the one thing that makes him the most interesting is I think this is the first villain, I think you even said it too, the first villain that has more in his character than I want to be evil or world domination. I think there's more depth to this character than I think in most other Bond villains. I think the main thing that makes Le Chiffre very interesting is I think his theme overall is basically bluff. He is a constant and master bluffer. If you look at a lot of things that he does in this film, he plays with the expectations of Bond and the other people that's around him, and it's gone too far, of course, but he is trying to bluff his way out of another bluff with another bluff. It is a very flawed type of villain that we're, again, like you said, we're not used to in these movies. I think that what's interesting is that Le Chiffre is basically Bond if he was a bad guy. I mean, think about it. He's intelligent, arrogant, cold, emotionally distant. And if this was Bond, this is who Bond would probably be, except that Bond is physically fit and can kick people's ass, and Le Chiffre definitely cannot. But I think in that instance, like, he is basically an evil Bond in this movie, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned he's sort of like an evil Bond, because throughout the movie, when Bond and Le Chiffre finally meet, it's just like a constant battle of wits.
All right, so let's get into the Bond girl, which is Vesper Lind, played by Eva Green.
This is once again another moment I will have to be very, very upfront about my biases. I quite like Eva Green. I think she's an absolute beauty. When she shows up for the first time on the train to Montenegro, with her being very, very, very clever and witty,
oh yeah,
just, I kind of fell in love with her. I was like, oh man, just, you've got a Bond girl who isn't just a pretty face, she's also very, very witty to boot. I was just like, this is gonna be great. Just someone who is just gonna match wits with Bond and just kind of keep up with him on his steps. This is gonna be fantastic.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I think very few Bond girls have done in the other movies, is just be somewhat of an equal to him. There's a few that physically are, and there are some that are aged like Bond is, but in this movie, she kind of calls him out on his bullshit a lot in this movie. And it still kind of makes sense as to why Bond gets smitten with her at the end of the movie. Not only is she gorgeous, that one scene in the Casino Royale in that black dress, like, oh my lord. She's also, like, very confident, intelligent. You mentioned that she puts him in his place a couple of times in the movie. And then Eva Green just plays her so well. And I think out of anybody in this movie, she gets the least amount of credit, but deserves the most. Because without this performance, Craig's Bond would look kind of limp in this movie. If she was bad in this movie, if she did not knock it out of the park like she did, Bond falling for her would seem very unlikely and would have collapsed the entire movie. But because she pulls it off so well, it's easily understandable why that Bond would fall for her. It works incredibly well and makes Bond a better character. Just an incredible job.
Yeah, she's a great counterweight, especially during the train to Montenegro and everything, because basically, I think that the one scene that sort of set things off on a good note was basically her asking, okay, so what's the grand plan? And Bond is basically like, well, we're just going to play poker. And, I'm just going to win the money, bankrupt Le Chiffre, and it'll be great. And then she kind of questions the logic. She's like, so let me get this straight. You're going to be playing poker to win back the money. And it's just all going to be hunky-dory. Bond just kind of counters with, poker's just bluffing. I just got to be the better dude. Everyone has little ticks and tells and things that kind of reveal things about their personality. And then they get into the whole profiling game, and Bond, as usual, being arrogant, he's just like, yeah, this is what I think you to be. You're probably an orphan and you're a woman in a man's world, and you've got a constant chip on your shoulder about it. So there you go. Probably nailed you to a T, right? She ends up kind of having a laugh with it and everything, and she's like, all right. If that's how you want to play, here's what I think of you. And then just kind of lays it all out there. And then, of course, just after just kind of laying it all out on the table, she kind of asks Bond, so how'd I do? And he's like, yeah, you did pretty good. So for me, I was just like, God, yeah, this is going to be a great movie. You've got a Bond girl who can kind of keep up with the smarm and arrogance that Bond has. This is going to be a fantastic movie.
If it wasn't for Eva Green playing Vesper Lynd so well, this movie would have fallen apart in one aspect, and it probably wouldn't be as good as it is. But because she is so vital in this movie and is believable in this, it really helps cement Bond in this movie in a way that makes it a very special movie. I want to say it again, she deserves much more credit than she's been getting on this movie. She's fantastic in this movie. I would say, honestly, she was probably the best performance in this movie. Spy action!
This one, there isn't too much on the spy side, but there's a lot on the action side. The beginning starts off on a bang. Bond's 00 status being given to him, and just the fight with the guy in the bathroom, holy crap, that was just an intense way to just start the movie. It starts off intense, and then it just gets even more intense after that, because of course you then travel to Madagascar, and you've got the scene where he's trying to chase the bomb maker through Madagascar, through like constructed buildings and stuff like that. The bomb maker is just going absolutely wild with his movements, and all because it's all part just very, very well choreographed parkour. And the best part is the person who plays the bomb maker is actually Sebastian Faucon, who is a French free runner. So basically the guy is a professional parkour runner.
Wow.
And you have this intense scene where he's just kind of outrunning Bond, just doing these intense movements, just hopping through just small crevices and just landing on his feet and just continually running. It was just such an intense action sequence, just the whole scene in Madagascar and everything. And then you get to just some of the later stuff, like the car chase sequence. Wasn't too intense, except for the car crash sequence. And then, of course, you've got the final chase sequence at the end, where he's trying to chase after people who've kidnapped Vesper and everything. And it's just very intense. A few spy moments are just when he's really just doing infiltration level stuff. So, like, getting into M's house to kind of borrow her computer and stuff like that. Breaking into the hotel security system to kind of find out on the security cameras if he can find out who sent the mysterious ellipsis message. And then putting the wireless bug into Le Chiffre's inhaler to kind of try to figure out if there's any interesting details he's got going on. The spy action's relatively simple, but I mean, it's not bad overall. But I think this one, really the big draw after this movie is just really going to be the action, and that's just going to be down to pretty much the choreography. The choreography is just so amazing.
Choreography is well done. I think, like you said, there is a few action sequences, and they're all very well done as well. Intense, brutal at times. But I think the most exciting thing about this movie, and I never thought until I watched it a second time again, I never thought the poker game would probably be the most exciting thing about this movie. It's actually really surprising. Like, I know how to play poker. I'm not great at it. Just the emotional stakes in that poker game, while everything is going on and around it, is incredibly fascinating in this movie, and it's highly entertaining to watch it as well. I think that it's what makes this film incredibly unique, that the most important thing in the movie is the poker game. Everything else is an action sequence, or it's used the final sequence, but the thing that ties the movie together and falls the villain in the end is the poker game. And I think it was really well done and a smart choice. I was really surprised, even this has been like a third time watching this, but I was really surprised how well it worked and how I did not miss a big bombastic action sequence at the end. Even though, well, I guess that final sequence with building falling down was a bombastic action sequence. Other than that, like, I think in terms of spy action, the less is more actually worked really well in this.
The poker game, I guess you could consider that more on the spy side because there was so much tension. You could cut the tension with a knife with just how much tension there was, especially when Bond just blows the money and completely loses to the false tell that Lashif has been setting up for most of the poker tournament and everything. Him sort of losing his cool and then kind of begging Vesper, going, hey, I know I screwed up, but can you, just go ahead and wire me another 5 million? Just, I promise, I'm not going to let my ego get to my head. It's going to be fine. And Vesper just going, you're just going to lose because you have no control over your arrogance. And then just Bond going, okay, well, if that's how you feel, guess I got to do this shit the dirty way. You just look at how the scenes are setting up, and it's looking to be another sort of brutal Bond moment, just a violent assassination, and you're thinking, oh man, this is just gonna get crazy. And then Jeffrey Wright showing up as Felix Leiter, kind of like telling him, hey man, let me help you out, and it'll be all good. And it sort of gets back into sort of the more spy espionage stuff, and it's just like, my god, just there's so much tension on this poker game, and it was about to turn into a bloody assassination, and then just Leiter just comes out of nowhere and is just like, hey man, there's no need for you to get violent. We can still do this.
Theme song opening credits. The song is You Know My Name, written by Chris Cornell and David Arnold, performed by Chris Cornell.
I love this song.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yes, it is.
Oh.
Holy shit.
Have you ever had a time when you listen to a song, and after you listen to it, you go, hold up, let me listen to that again, and you do it right away?
Yeah.
Happened to me after this one. Like, I was watching this, like, oh my god, this kicks so much ass. Why don't I remember this kicking so much ass? Then I was like, okay, let's go back to the first scene. Boom, and then, oh my god, it is that good. Holy shit. Oh, okay, let's be serious now. Go ahead. Sorry.
The fact that you had Chris Cornell singing the song, and Chris Cornell's just fantastic. I mean, most of the reason that I know Chris Cornell is really from his days when he was performing for Soundgarden. Remember him so much from there, and then just when you just hear him start to sing the intro, I was just like, oh my god, is this Chris Cornell? Oh, holy shit, it is! Yeah. It's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful performance from him and everything, and the song's just so good, and his performance just gives it just a little bit over the edge to just make it one of the few best Bond theme songs that we've seen.
Oh, it's fucking incredible. Oh my god. And then on top of that, the opening credit sequence. My god. You ever get this when you watch a movie for like the first few minutes, and you're like, oh, this is gonna be good. That's the exact feeling I got from these opening credits. Like, it nailed everything so fucking perfect. I was like, oh my god. Like, the way that the opening sequence is. And one thing that they did in this, that I don't think they did in other Bond films, is incorporate the actual Bond actor into this. I think they've had ones where, like, a vignette of the person who's Bond, or like a still photo is in there. But in this, they literally show Craig in the opening sequence doing awesome shit, and then, oh god, it's so damn good. You know what it feels like to me? It feels like that after everyone was talking about, I don't know, Daniel Craig as Bond, I was like, it's like the filmmaker went, we've got this, and we are so fucking sure, here he is right here. And, oh wow, it works so damn well. Like, oh man. What'd you think of the opening credit sequence?
The opening credit sequence was great. It was an animated sequence, but that doesn't take away from just how fantastic it is. And I think it ends up coming off a little bit classier than some of the Brosnan-era CG-heavy introduction sequences and stuff like that. This one was just an absolute treat for the eyes. Oh. And then combined with just You Know My Name with Chris Cornell singing it. Oh, just absolutely fantastic way to just kick this saga off.
I get the feeling that we're going to go into our recap going, what is the best thing that's been done like this in a Bond film? Oh, Casino Royale. What's the best thing? Casino Royale. Oh, the best Bond? Casino Royale. Like, and, you know, I hate to do that, but goddamn, this movie is so goddamn... Let's get into conclusions.
This one is just a mission accomplished. There's just... God, no other way to put it. It just nails the execution and sets things up for a fantastic new era of Bond with Daniel Craig As someone who used to read a lot of the Bond novels when I was younger, this one really nailed what I was wanting from the Brosnan era. I wanted a Bond that was just a little bit more brutal, a little bit more true to the novels, and then in this one, they just do exactly that. They just kind of go, let's go back to basics with Bond, no crazy gadgets, and let's just do that. And it comes up as just a fantastic movie, and it's one of those weird sequences of sometimes less is more, is the old axiom, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, just this one, for having less, it does so much more with it.
You know, this reminded me of the third or fourth movie we reviewed. I don't know if you remember this, but the third or fourth movie we reviewed was Casablanca. And yes. And the first thing that I mentioned in the review, and when we talked about it before, was it's been a long time since I've seen Casablanca. And maybe it's not as good as I remembered. Oh my God, maybe I've overrated it all this time because I love Casablanca. But it's been a while since I've seen it. Maybe it's aged poorly. Maybe it's not as good as I thought it was. And then you get 2 minutes in and I go, what the fuck was I thinking? This is fucking brilliant. What am I talking about? This is so good. And this is the exact thing I felt watching this movie. Within minute 1, you know, oh my God, this is great. This is so good. And then you get into the opening sequence and you get to, oh God, this is the best Bond movie, period. So, you know what? That's not even fair. This is a great movie, period. With a lot of the Bond films, if you're not a Bond fan, I don't see any reason to watch these movies. This is the one exception. I would say to a person who is not a Bond fan, you should still watch Casino Royale. It's very good. And I think they will enjoy it. That is the mark of a great film, and Casino Royale is special in that way because it does a number of things that the other Bond films did not do. But this does, and it does incredibly well, and that is make Bond into a fully fleshed out character. Sounds simple, but they didn't do it in the other 20, but in this one they did, and they did it incredibly well. Oh God. Keep going, I know you got more to say.
Yeah, just overall, this one, I would agree with your sentiment that if someone says, hey, I'm just not into the Bond movies, and maybe the reason why is like they'll bring up the Brosnan era stuff of like, just a lot of the Bond movies have him as a womanizer, and yeah, this one would be one of the occasions that I would say, hey, I know, it's not your genre, but give this one a chance. This one is actually fantastic.
It's really one where I think anybody who gives it a chance will enjoy this. Will they enjoy other Bonds? I don't know. That depends on the person. But I would say to anybody, give me a Bond film to watch, start with Casino Royale. And then if you really love the character and you really love this movie and everything, then I would say go backwards. But really, like, Casino Royale is the best Bond film. Period. End of discussion. There is no other that is better. If the other films that come out next come close to this, it would be a fucking miracle. But I just don't see how that happening. Casino Royale is the best Bond film out there. Mission accomplished for me. Mission accomplished for you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, mission accomplished for Casino Royale. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.